I don't know if a lot of people know this or realize this, but the Bible is full of political topics, full of debates and disagreements, full of kings and governments making decisions, leading a people, and doing what they feel is right. The Bible's full of that. The Bible is full of things of that nature. I think if we're not careful, sometimes we think, or people who don't have as much biblical experience, we just equate the Bible to Sunday school lessons. We just think about things like Daniel and the lion's den. We think about Jonah and the whale. And when we think of those stories, as crucial as they are and can be, it's like, how do they equate to real life? How do they equate to decisions that need to be made? How do they equate to government entities and life as we know it? Well, unless you deep dive further, we don't see that. And sometimes our culture misses things like that. But the Bible's full of stuff like that. I mean, just in the Old Testament alone, we have, First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles, and they're very similar. They're almost identical, and they paint slightly different pictures. But what they what they contain, for the most part, is a story of how kings come and go. One king comes, he dies, another takes his place. He dies, another takes his place, and on and so forth. The Bible is clear on, hey, this king did what was pleasing in the Lord's eyes, and this other king, well, he did not. They each have their own ideas of what was good, what needed to change, what needed to happen. They followed either themselves and possibly what the people wanted, or they followed God. I mean, that is the big indicator of what was pleasing in God's eyes and what wasn't. If you followed God and did what he wanted to do and what we knew based on history and based on the law that was given to Moses and the Israelites, if that king followed that and those decrees, then it was pleasing in God's eyes. If a king, however, abandoned that and did what culture wanted, what people wanted, and what ultimately their own self wanted, then that wasn't pleasing in God's eyes. And we can see the effects of that in their reign and in their story. Solomon tells us this in Ecclesiastes: what has been done will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Let me say that one more time. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. And what is he saying? Well, what has happened in the past will happen again. What's happening now will happen again. There's not going to be anything new in our culture, in our life, that hasn't happened already. I know that sometimes we think that, well, that's just not true. There's so many different things that are going on now that possibly could not have happened. And there's some pretty intriguing stories in the Bible that would put some of our cultural decisions and experience nowadays to shame. There's nothing new under the sun. Again, the Bible talks about taxes. Jesus even talks about that and uses that in his parables and stories. The Bible is flooded with wars, with battles, with God's people winning and God's people losing. Again, based on the king, based on his relationship with God, and ultimately what he chose to do and not to do. The Bible is full of this information. And so we have a new debate going on within our nation. We have a law that's wanting to be passed for January 6th commission, a January 6th commission. And if you remember what happened on January 6th, even though the footage and the videos clearly contradict what the Democratic side is saying, Trump initiated violence and told the people to go and to riot at the Capitol and basically tear the place apart. Well, that's what the Democrats are saying. The video footage clearly says something different, talking about a peaceful protest, going there and have your voice heard. That's what we do or should do whenever there's a decision that we disagree with. Whether I feel like something is right or wrong, I want someone to voice their opinion if they disagree with it. I want them to raise their voice. I want their voice to be heard. And then I want us as a people, as a culture, to be able to discuss that, debate that, and figure out why one party feels one way and why the other feels the opposite. That's how it should be ran. That's how it should be conducted. It's sad whenever we have we have so much hypocrisy in our nation and so much division. I mean, we look at this January 6th commission, this January 6th insurrection, as they call it, which in my opinion is a very strong word for what happened, which the word doesn't fit the bill. But we have people who are wanting to do something about this. And in the same breath, these people condone and allow what happened last summer to continue, and then to pat on the back and even help people post bail from these Black Lives Matter movements, these protests, these riots, these violent outbreaks. And those are different. Destruction was taking place, violence was taking place, private properties and government properties were being burned down and destroyed while people were being killed. Those aren't okay. Those are completely different than a peaceful protest. So we have differing opinions within our government, and we're always going to have differing opinions. I get that. And we're not always going to see eye to eye, and we're not made to be. We're not meant to be, I don't think. If we were, it'd be a utopia and a perfect place, and that's not going to happen. But ABC News reports that Republican leader Mitch McConnell announced Wednesday morning that he intends to oppose a bill that would create a commission to examine the events of January 6th. McConnell comments came after former President Donald Trump released a statement Tuesday night warning that Republicans in the House and Senate should not approve the Democrat trap of the January 6th commission. Republicans must get much tougher and much smarter and stop being used by the radical left. The statement concludes, hopefully Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy are listening. And so, kudos to Mitch, because it seems like the voice and the actions of the Republican Party are dwindling down, and not enough people are standing up against the vast majority or the loudest voices. And they're not standing up for what they believe and what I would even say know is right. And that's what made Donald Trump so good at his job. I don't agree with everything he did or said. I don't. But one thing is certain, he knew what he wanted, and he pushed forward to achieve it. Nothing that he wanted was inherently bad and bad for us as a nation and a people. He knew what he wanted, and he pushed forward to get it. Period. There was no hesitancy, and let's stop and discuss this for a second. If he knew what needed to be done, that's what his goal was. Period. And if we allow this commission to go on, you may be saying, well, if there's nothing to hide, let them go investigate it, let them go look at it, let them deep dive into it. I see that point. At the same time, I would make the point that why waste money, time, energy to do this when there's nothing to look at? And if we're going to look at that, then let's turn around and let's look at other instances that far outweigh and are far worse than this. Why is there so much division in our United States of America? Why is there so much division on topics and situations that seem so black and white, so cookie cutter, that you think, well, only someone who lacks common sense would see the situation in a different light? So we have good choices and decisions from the GOP, from Mitch. Again, thank you for having your voice be heard and to say something against the vast majority. We need more of that. So we move from choices and decisions that the government's making to some not so good decisions in our culture. They're making up more new words and new terms that it's almost impossible to keep up with all of them. And then they expect us as people, as citizens, to use them correctly. Otherwise, we could face charges. We should hate crimes and all sorts of nonsense. USA Today, they wrote this: You've likely started to hear the term non-binary more frequently. On Wednesday, Demi Lovato announced they were non-binary and changed their pronouns to they and them. The non-binary refers to someone who does not identify only as a man or a woman, i.e. the traditional gender binary, according to the Human Rights Campaign. They could identify as both a man and a woman, in between the two genders, or not a part of any gender category at all. And GLAAD, G-L-A-A-D, offers a similar definition. Someone who is non-binary may also be transgender. Elliot Page, for example, identifies as both, but that is not always the case. GLAAD recommends only calling someone non-binary if they claim that identity themselves. What? When will this nonsense stop? There's so many things wrong with just the 3 little paragraphs that I read. So, Demi Lovato announces they, talking as if she's multiple people, they and them. What? It makes you sound like an idiot. It makes you sound like you've lost your marbles. And God made man and woman, male and female, period. God doesn't make mistakes, period. And these people who choose to change who they are from man to woman or woman to man, they're not mentally there. They are mentally lacking in something. They're struggling with something, because all they're trying to do is pretend to be someone they're not. I mean, a man's always going to be a man and a woman, always a woman. But if you have a man trying to be a woman, that man is pretending to be a woman. Just as if my 5-year-old was pretending to be Superman. There's no difference. There is no difference whatsoever. And then we come down to the end and it says, make sure, make sure we don't call them non-binary unless they call themselves that. We need to make sure that we as citizens do our part of pretending with them that they're who they say they are. Hey, unless they call themselves that, then you don't call them that. But if someone wants to be called a man and they're actually a woman, then you better call them that. You better identify them as such, because if you don't, then you hate them. You're racist. You're a transphobe, or whatever the terminology is. That's crazy. That's crazy. Our culture is downstream of our leadership. What our leadership does or says, it flows down to culture. It flows down to us. I know that so many of these problems and struggles that we face as a society would not exist if we had different leadership in different roles, if we took different steps to combat these things. I have no doubt about that. But again, we have leadership and it flows down to our culture. Obviously, our culture has some questionable decisions, but our leaders also do. CNN wrote an article on how to use American Rescue Plan funds to invest in women. And why the emphasis? Why the emphasis just on the headline alone? Why the emphasis on women? I'm not against women workers. I'm not against women doing something besides their traditional, child rearing and things of that nature. I'm not against that. I do think that if we would stop and pause for a minute and we would think and look back at history and see kind of how life was done, then I think that would better set us up for success. I think that would help us to I think that would help to straighten us out as a society. But nevertheless, this is what CNN writes. In the coming weeks, state and local governments will have to decide how to spend $350 billion in flexible federal aid that will be distributed as part of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. So the last stimulus package that we got. One important way they can spend these funds is to invest in women, so that it is possible for millions of them to enter or re-enter the workforce and remain in it. So again, why women? Why is it so specific? What about men? What about men? What about equality? Just saying. Millions of Americans are out of work, and widespread layoffs at the start of the pandemic affected many female-dominant industries like retail, hospitality, and restaurants. Black and Latina women have been especially hard hit. So now we don't just go from canceling men to just focusing on women. Now we go from canceling white women to focusing on Black and Latina women. Talk about racist. Talk about racism at its finest, coming from our leftist news. Again, what we have said from leadership and the direction that they take and the narrative they push, that's what's going to flow down to culture. That's what's going to shape us. That's what's going to dictate how we act and what we do. We have a perfect example of that, of Maxine Waters during the George Floyd trial, whenever she told people to essentially go out and riot and do what we did before so we can make sure we get the right verdict. I don't know. I don't know. In January, the labor force participation among women hit the lowest rate in 33 years, according to National Women's Law Center analysis. The April jobs report showed that women are continuing to drop out of the labor force, an issue that is likely exacerbated by the difficulty of balancing childcare with paid work. Again, why is there such a push for women to work? Because of women's rights, women power, equality. Men work, women need to work too. I'm not opposed to that. But based on history, based on the Bible, women and men are different. Women and men have different roles to play. Looking at myself and my family, I have a wife, I have a son and a daughter. He's 5 and she's 3. I could not stay at home all day and raise them as well as my wife could. My wife has been, and I believe for the foreseeable future will be doing this for homeschooling and in other ways of life. She is more equipped to do this. She's different than I am. Could I if I had to? Sure. And then could she work? Sure. We could reverse roles. That's not the way I believe God intended it to be. The women are the nourishers, the caretakers, the more sympathetic and more compassionate ones. That's the way God made us. God made us different, and we are trying to make everyone fit in this bubble that we weren't meant to be in, that we were not meant to be in. There's two different religious topics and aspects that we're going to look at. This first one is a couple weeks old, but it's still so relevant, and it goes along with the point of our leadership shaping our culture. What I see you do and hear you do, I'm going to do as well. Just like a son and his father. I want to set the perfect example for my son. I want him to do what I do. I want him to say what I say. I want to be a father figure that is God-fearing and God-honoring, and I want him to do the same. I can't expect him to do that if I'm not doing that myself. It doesn't work that way. Actions do speak louder than words. So ABC News reports that the U.S. Catholic bishops may press Biden to stop taking communion. Now, I'm not Catholic. From what little I know about Catholicism, it does differ a little bit or a lot of it with how I was raised and just different traditional Protestant beliefs. But nevertheless, I do believe the major focus is still the same, and I say again, kudos to the bishop who are taking a stand against our leadership, and who are taking a stance that is opposed to the loud voices. I haven't been in a situation like that, but I would definitely say that it would take some courage to do that, to stand up against power and authority, even when it's just you. This is what ABC News writes. Such a stance by a public figure is a grave moral evil. according to Archbishop Joseph Naumann of Kansas City, Kansas, who chairs the USCCB's Committee on Pro-Life Activities and believes it's necessary to publicly rebuke Biden on the issue. Quote, because President Biden is Catholic, it presents a unique problem for us, Naumann told the Associated Press. It can create confusion. How can he say he's a devout Catholic, which he says that a lot, and he's doing these things that are contrary to the church's teaching? That's a fantastic question. Fantastic. How can you say you're one thing and then do something completely opposite? You can't. You can't. You're a hypocrite. Period. Those are some devastating words. It should be some devastating words to someone who is a, quote, devout Catholic. That should make you re-examine yourself and think, holy cow, I need to get right with God. I need to figure out what's going on and what he just told me. I need to lay this out and fix some things. Again, getting back to God and understanding what he desires and what he wants from me. But Biden and the Democratic Party, they are very, very pro-abortion. Pro-choice is the term that they use. That sounds a lot better than pro-abortion. We hide it in things like Planned Parenthood. We make it sound like that this organization does more than just abortions, and they're women's health, and that's what they conclude. That's what they tell that's what they tell themselves. They try to justify it out by making it sound better than what it is. Even they know that it's dark and evil and morally wrong. It's like, why do people know one thing is wrong, but they continue doing it anyways, and they try to mask it up by calling it something else. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I said, that's a scary place to be at. That's a scary place to be at, to be convicted by God, to know something is wrong, but you continue to do it anyways. Because what's going to happen is your heart is going to get hard. It's going to get hard. You're going to be confronted by that again. It's going to get harder. You're going to be confronted by that again. It's going to get harder. The harder your heart becomes, the less likely you are going to be to make the decision that's right. And that's a horrible and terrifying place to be in. This other religious article that came up is even more frustrating. Makes me even more angry at some of the decisions that we make as a world. I mean, because this instance is not even in our nation, but it's down in Brazil, and it upsets me because it proclaims a message that isn't true at all. So I don't know, I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with this famous statue of Jesus Christ in Rio de Janeiro. It's a giant statue of Jesus with his hands out, extended, and on top of a mountain, a very high hill. And they decided to do something a little different. Reuters.com, this is what they wrote. The world's most famous statue of Jesus Christ was lit up in Rio de Janeiro to promote vaccine equality as Brazil and developing countries struggle to protect residents from COVID-19. The message, "Vaccines Save, United for Vaccines," was projected on Saturday onto the 98-foot statue by Unidos pela Vacina in partnership with Cristo Renter Sanctuary and the Ogilvy Brazil Advertising Agency. In January, 2 healthcare workers received the first shots of coronavirus vaccine at the foot of the statue as Brazil kicked off its vaccination campaign. So Ryan, why does that make you upset? Well, because first, and whether we agree or disagree on the statue, I'm not the biggest fan of having statues, because statues in my mind are man-made, and they relate back to things such as idols. I mean, and so again, I'm not going to get on that topic, but we have the statue of Jesus Christ, and so then we're going to project something onto him, which isn't true. We're going to project something onto him, essentially covering him up with something that I don't believe he would ever say. Vaccines save. No. Jesus saves. Vaccines only extend your life, possibly. But did you know something? And I hate to break this to everyone, but we're all going to die. We're all going to die. I could get up out of this chair and I could drive to the store and I could not return home. It's possible. I could live to be 120 years old. I have no idea. Vaccinated or not, we're all going to die. Jesus saves. Vaccines do not. And to see this put on by this sanctuary, I don't know much about this organization, but if my wife and I were attending that church, that congregation, we would be furious. We would be questioning their choices and be demanding an apology. That makes me upset that they would do that and slander the name of my Lord and Savior, which is what I believe it is. Our society doesn't want to look down on anybody. They don't want to tell people what to do. They don't want to call sin. That's a bad word, and it's not used at all in our society anymore. It's used in churches and among church folk, but it's not in our society anymore. Sin is not talked about because sin is bad, and the things that we promote and raise up being sinful, we're not going to call what we're doing bad. We're not going to call abortion sinful because majority of society, or at least the leadership, promotes it. We're not going to call transgenderism bad because we promote it. We're not going to call racism bad because we promote it. Jesus doesn't approve of sin, period. Jesus doesn't approve of the wrong things that we do. It's terrifying whenever I look around in our society and some of the songs that are sang and the messages that are preached that talk about how Jesus is love, and he is, absolutely. How Jesus wants us to come to him as we are, and he does, absolutely. We can't fix ourselves, only he can help change us from the inside out. But we stop there. We don't go further. We don't go deeper with him. Because Jesus doesn't expect us to stay the way that we were. Paul tells us that we're all new creations. The old has died and the new has come. We are new creations in Christ. We put off the old self. We press forward in something new with him. Jesus doesn't approve of sin. And we're scared to say that out loud. It's like one of the first messages that Jesus talked about whenever he started his ministry. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. What does that mean? Repent. It means to turn around. It means to turn away from those things that we did before, and we're going to turn to something or someone different. We're going to change our life with the help of Jesus Christ. When Jesus encountered a woman who was about to be stoned to death by some soldiers, and Jesus confronted them, and Jesus told them simply, "You without sin cast the first stone. Out of you guys who are wanting to throw rocks at her to kill her, out of you guys, if you have not sinned, I want you to please throw the first rock." And the Bible tells us slowly they dropped their stones and they walked away. And it was Jesus and it was this lady. Probably terrified, probably thinking, yeah, I'm about to die. I imagine the relief that she saw and felt whenever she raised her head up and saw no one around but Jesus. And Jesus asked, well, where are the ones that came to kill you? And they all left. And Jesus tells her, I don't condemn you. Just as they don't, I don't either. But then Jesus says one more thing. To get up and go and to sin no more. So this lady was caught in prostitution. That's why she was being dragged out to be stoned to death. That was the culture. That was the law. Jesus saved her from death, forgave her, and told her to go and sin no more. Period. He didn't condone what she was doing. He didn't say, your prostitution life, there's nothing wrong with that. You got to do what you have to do to make it through life. He didn't say that. But that's a message that we would hear in our culture. That we're all individuals. We all have a choice. Do what makes you happy. You're a struggling mom. Do what you need to do to get by. Those are the things that we would hear, which is completely contrary to what Jesus says and says in his word. Completely different. Where do we go from here? What do we need? What do we need to do for our country and for our nation? We as Christians, we as followers of Christ, need to call sin what it is, which is sin. It's evil, and it's contrary to God and his word. We need to call it that. We don't need to be afraid of that or ashamed of his word. We need to fight for God, fight with God, to change the way that the world around us works. We were talking about our river scenario a while ago, that our culture is downstream of our leadership. But what is our leadership downstream of? Well, our leadership is downstream of God. So God is more than willing, more than capable of changing our leadership. Period. But it's up to our leadership to decide, yes, I'm going to accept that flow of water down to me, or I'm going to build a dam and that water's not coming anywhere near me. We need our culture and our society to get back to God, to leadership, and then to culture. We need to get back to that routine and that rhythm. And not that following God is some kind of rhythm, but we need to get back to that life. We need to get back to that place of where God is running our country. I know I want to live in a country, in a nation that is ran by a president, a leader, a king, that it can be said of him, like it is in the Bible, that this king, this president, did what was right and pleasing in the eyes of the Lord. That's what I want to be a part of. That's what I want to help us get to as a nation. So, as always, I appreciate you guys watching. If you like the video, click that for me. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please send them my way. I'll be happy to address them. As always, if you heard something I said that you don't agree with, let me know. Let me know so I can apologize for it, or so I can double down on what I said and make sure my points are accurate and honest. So, as always, thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.